The one thing that I didn't never do, I never called the police on my ex-husband. And there was times that myself and the kids would sleep in the car, running out the house, sleeping in the car. It was times that we slept in a shelter. There were times that we just went to a hotel when I had the money. And it didn't matter with him. He shifted from heroin finally to alcohol, which didn't make sense either because it was still a drug that not only provoked him, but escalated it when he got mad. So he would drink until he get mad, and then everything would escalate, and everything would be worse. Not only was he an alcoholic, his dad was alcoholic. And not only did his dad beat his mother, his grandpa beat his grandmother, so it was generational. For years, I hid the fact of what I was going through. In and out of hospitals, wouldn't call anybody. I was there by myself. Wouldn't call my sisters, wouldn't call anybody. I would endure that time, go back to work. The way I kept my job at AK Steel, I would trade shifts with people and ask them if they would work one shift for me. And I would work two for them because at night there'd be hours and hours of fighting and screaming and hollering. There was no way I could go to work. And so that's how I was able to keep my job at AK Steel. And I did that until I was in my 30s. I had my son and my daughter. And I couldn't take it anymore. And then I began to think, you know, I wanted to raise my kids with their dad. And I began to think, okay, is my son going to be like his dad, just like my ex was like his dad, and his dad was like his dad? And after I began to think about that, I didn't want that to happen. So I decided to leave. Leaving is the most dangerous time. Whenever a victim finally makes up her mind to leave, and we're allowing victims to be women today because 90% of victims of domestic violence are women. And women that have kids, 60 to 65% of the kids will be involved in that domestic violence. And I decided I'm ready to get out of this. And I didn't know all the facts, and I didn't know what I was really involved in. Actually, I didn't know it had a name. I just thought he was really mean like his dad. But he was violent, and it's worse than being mean. The day that I began to move, my sister sent a guy over to help me move. I bought a house in Middletown closer to AK Steel. Actually, it was next to AK Steel. And this guy came over to help me move, and he was a little different. Now, this guy, where my ex never wanted me to go anywhere, I never did anything to take care of the kids. I was timed every time I left the house. This guy wanted me to go out. He wanted to have fun. I had never done anything like this. He wanted to take me to a bar. First time in my life I ever went to the bar I was in my 30s. And I remember the day when we went out, the bar doors open. I could not believe it was music, people laughing and playing, dancing, and just having a good time playing games. And I thought, oh my God, all this time my ex had told me different things about what it was like to go into a bar. Here I am in a bar, having fun with this guy, and we started dating. But the thing about him, he snorted cocaine and wanted me to. Well, I was open to try it because I thought I was having so much fun. Not only that, I learned how to drink, smoke cigarettes, and do all the things that he was doing because I thought that was fun, and he showed me fun. And in my 30s, I thought I had never had fun before. So here I am in my 30s with a different man going out, thinking I'm having fun, and about 60 to 90 days into that relationship, I fell to the floor, couldn't get up. He come to pick me up and he asked, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't know. My mind is saying get up, but my body's not responding. So he actually took me to the hospital and they told me that I was dying. They said I had bombarded my system with all these poisons and it was killing me. I actually stayed in the hospital for 35 days and I made it. And I was thinking while I was in there, you know, this guy was fun, but it's not really what I wanted when I divorced my husband. So when I get out of here, I'm going to tell him thank you, but no thank you. When I get out of the hospital, he's living in my house. He's driving my car. He had started picking up my checks from AK Steel. He had opened up my house to after hours. If everybody knows what an after hours is, it's a place that people go to after the bars close. So there's people running in and out of my house. There's loud music, neighbors complaining, and I want my stuff back. But that's when I found out he was violent. Just when I told him to get out, that's when he showed me his violent side. Here I am again. Stuck in the same situation, different man, same situation. But this man I called the police on because he was not my husband, he was not the father of my kids. The sad thing about that, the laws were not what they are now. They would take him out the house, talk to him, tell him to cool down, and the police would leave, only for things to get worse after the police left. So here I am, stuck again. Don't know who to call, don't want to call anybody really, because people don't understand. They tell you stuff like, you must like getting hit, or you must like men to hit you. That's your house, Etta. Why don't you just tell them to get out? But every time the fight got worse and worse until here I am going to the hospitals again. And I'm going to be honest, every time I went to the hospital, I told a lie. I didn't tell the truth. Oh, I tripped over the rug under the coffee table and hit the coffee table. Or I opened the kitchen cabinet and hit my face, and that's how I got a bruise on my face. And I lied to anybody who asked me when I went to work if I had a black eye or busted lip or something. I would tell them, make up something. So here I am, same situation, calling the police on this guy. And even if they took him to jail, when he got out of jail, he came right back to the house, and it seemed like he just tried to tear the house down, busting out windows, throwing things. Me and my kids running out the house again, finding a place to stay in a hotel or shelter, or just sleeping in the car. Neighbors got to where they didn't want to be bothered with me. I bang on my neighbor's door and sit on the porch, and I could hear them in the house, and they wouldn't respond to my banging on the door. So finally, one day, we were arguing in the kitchen, and I told him to get out, and he left. I thought, wow, that was easy. Then I thought that was really too easy. A couple of days later, I was walking in my house, and I felt like somebody was in the house. I looked around the house, and sure enough, he was upstairs in my bed. And I told him, I said, didn't I tell you to get out? And just as I said that, he jumped out the bed, hit me in the face. I did a backflip over the bed. I held my face and ran into the bathroom. I said, look what you did to my face. He said, there's nothing wrong with your face. Put some ice on it, put some sunglasses on, put a hat on. Nobody had noticed. And I thought all these years I've been going through this and nobody noticed. Nobody had answers for me. Nobody could tell me how to get out. They just kept telling me I must like me in the BB and you could get rid of him if you wanted to. And people sometimes do want to help, but they just don't have the correct information for you. They can't begin to understand why women stay in domestic violence. And it's for many reasons. It's like Jackie had mentioned the reason she wanted to stay because she wanted her kids to be raised with their father. I wanted my kids to be raised with their father. I wanted to have a happy life. And that's basically all I wanted, was to be happy. I wanted to do things as a family. I didn't want to give up my relationship as a wife to my husband until I had to. But this guy was not my husband. But I thought, you know what, he's right. Nobody cares. I went to the kitchen, found some ice, put it on my eye, found a hat, put some sunglasses on, and we were riding around, and my face was hurting so bad. I had decided I didn't want to go back to the hospital with injuries from a violent relationship, but my face was hurting, so I asked this guy to take me to the hospital, and he took me. And when I got there, a lady that was there said, this guy that brought you in, did he do this to you? And it took me a minute because all of a sudden I couldn't think of an excuse. None of them all of a sudden made sense. And I told her yes. I said, yes, he did this to me. She went out and got the police, and she also came in with the x-ray. She held that x-ray up and she said, this is a picture of your face. You see this line here? He broke your face. This nerve that's above this line, if that nerve settled in that break, your face will be paralyzed. 5 loose teeth, eye socket is damaged, your sinuses are knocked out of place. And she said, we'll help you if you let us. Now, I had experienced some of the same things that Jackie had explained: hair pulling, pushing, grabbing, kicking, spit on, urination. But all of a sudden, I felt like this is it. This is the last straw. I can't take it anymore. And she said, we'll help you if you let us. And those words just didn't take hold of my brain in the beginning. And I'm thinking, all these people that I had in my past, nobody had answers for me. And I just wasn't sure that she had the right answers for me. And I thought about it, and she allowed me to think about it. And I finally accepted her help. And they devised a way to arrest this guy. They told me to tell him to take my son to my house and they would follow him in an unmarked police car, and we would be in a police car behind them. And sure enough, he took my son straight to my house. As soon as he got out the car, police jumped out from everywhere, handcuffed him, and took him to jail. When I went to the hospital, my face was so swollen that you couldn't even hardly tell I had an eye. It was just a black line on my face. And the judge said, "Sir," as he walked out in his orange jumpsuit and chains, "Did you do this to this lady?" "No, Your Honor, I love her. I would never hit her. No, I gave her money, I gave her a house, I gave her a car." I'm like, "Look, that's my stuff. That's my house, it's my car, it's my money, and I want my stuff back." And the judge didn't know who to believe. Actually sent out for information, and they came back and realized that I was the homeowner. I worked at AK Steel. It was my car, my money. And the judge said to this man, "I want you out of the city of Middletown, and I never want you back here, or else you will go back to prison." And it hit me, back to prison. Nobody never told me. He was a friend of my sister's. I hung around with his family. His sister spent the night at my house, and not one person told me that he had already been to prison for domestic violence. And it was just an angel who followed me home. One of the bailiffs actually followed me home and stood in my living room with his gun exposed while this guy was packing his stuff and left. Else, I don't believe I'd be standing here today. I continued to find myself in domestic violent relationships. I was in and out, in and out. My solution was, as soon as I realized that they're violent, get out. And I did that until 1994. One day I happened to walk into a church, not looking for anything particular. I just realized that I hadn't been in years, and I went, and I had wonderful change that happened to me that day. I got saved, and my life began to change. My life had been full of pain, full of hurt, situations that I had no control over. I wondered why I had lived a life of so much pain. But as my change began to happen, I realized why I went through the things that I had gone through. God had a plan and a purpose for my life. I just didn't know it yet. But the one thing that I did realize is that in my life change, I realized that I had to start forgiving some people because I wanted God to forgive me. And I had to forgive whoever the person that murdered my mom. I had to forgive that person. And as I started that journey, then I realized I had to forgive the men that abused me, that had mistreated me, that had caused me and my kids so much pain. And I neglected to mention that I actually lost a son when I was 6 months pregnant. And so I've gone through a lot of different things as far as abuse and domestic violence, and still not knowing what it was. And in 1996, I was licensed as a minister, but I still felt embarrassed about what I had gone through, and I still wasn't discussing it with anybody, still wasn't telling it to anybody. And in 2000, I became director of Feed the Hungry Project in Middletown, Ohio. And in that, I realized now I have freedom to go to college. I always wanted to go to college, and I'm married right out of high school, so I took the chance and said I can do this. So I entered Miami University January 2002 after resigning from AK Steel. Again, has still never heard of domestic violence and decided to be a social worker after talking to some people. And one day, in one of our books, I was reading a story about a woman with a son and a daughter crouched down in the corner, dialing 911, trying to get help because her husband was beating her up. And I sat in that classroom and wept uncontrollably because I'm like, all these years I have protected my story. I hadn't told anybody. And somebody knew my story and printed it in this book. And I ran up to my professor and I said, "This is my story." And I was crying. I mean, in front of the class, it didn't even matter at that point. I couldn't even control myself. And she said, "Yeah." And I'm like, this is my story. I have a son and a daughter. And I was crouched down in the corner trying to dial for help. And somebody found out and printed my story in this book. And she was like, "Yeah." And I said, "This is what I want to do the rest of my life, help women that's involved in domestic violence because there was no help there for me." And she said, "Okay." And so from that moment on, I made it my first priority to find out all I could about domestic violence. First of all, I realized the violence that I was going through had a name, and I was able to identify it as domestic violence. It doesn't have any borders. It doesn't have any lines that separate women